Hello everyone, this is Ek from EkTech Games, and in this video I'm going to talk about what the Data Driven Enums package does. Data Driven Enums is a package that lets you tie metadata to int or string ID values and serves as a replacement for C# enums. This allows developers to move away from hard coding against specific enum values and drive code decisions with data instead. When we do this, it makes the code cleaner and easier to maintain while also making it trivial to add new entries in the enumeration. Additionally, when this data is defined from files inside of streaming assets, modders will have a much easier time modding that data and extending the life of your game. These benefits are best illustrated with a quick example. So let's say you had some kind of mech game with various factions. You could define that with a C# enum, and if we needed the different factions to behave differently, say whether or not it was valid for a procedural contract or whether or not that faction should award reputation, then you'd write a few switch statements that might look something like this. Up here we have our C# enumeration with the individual enum values. We've declared a type so that we can mess with it a bit. And we have a couple of functions that are basically just a switch block that say whether or not it should be used for generating procedural contracts or whether or not it should award reputation. So in a real example, there might be 9 or 10 of these decision points for a given enum, and this code isn't especially complicated, but anytime you want to modify or add a faction, it's a brittle process that requires changing lots of code. So let's say we add a new faction. Let's just walk through that. Excalibur Mercenaries, give it a value, and we have to go to each of these individual code blocks and add a new entry for Excalibur Mercenaries. Did I add it up here? I did not. Since we have a space in our name, we need a pretty name so that we can show the user. Excalibur Mercenaries. We added it to the procedural contract, and we need to add it to the award reputation block as well. So in this example, all the code is in this single file, but in a real game project, these code blocks might be scattered throughout the code base. And if you forget to modify one of the switch statements, you won't know about it until runtime. Since it's in the code base, it usually requires a programmer to make those changes, and you can't just hand this off to a designer and they'll usually come and pester a programmer to come in and add a new faction for them to start using. So using data-driven enums, we can drive those code decisions with data instead. If we associate metadata bits for is procedural faction and should award reputation to the faction enum value, then we can write code against those bits instead. It's a much cleaner system and all the data is in one spot instead of spread out across the project. So looking at our data-driven example, we look at our enum value and we can see that where the data bits are defined inside this little class. Inside the faction, looks like I've already got Excalibur Mercenaries added in here, but I'll just re-add it for demonstration purposes. You can see how the individual factions have this data defined in this JSON file. And to add this, we just go here, give it a unique ID, Excalibur Mercenaries, Excalibur Mercenaries. And that's how easy it is to add. Looking at the C# code for the same thing, this is the main switch statement that you'll see all over the place. But over here in the data-driven enum example, that same function is just reduced to one line. We're just accessing that data bit instead. And down here, we're just logging this these log messages so that we can see the results, and that's what this is down here. Here we're building that meta bit kind of dynamically with code instead of through that JSON file. Looking over here, and with data-driven enums, we draw the stuff the exact same as it appears in the inspector. So here we can look at Krita. I need to run the thing to get any output. Look over at our console log messages, run the sample. So Karita is a procedural contract faction and should award reputation. Excalibur Mercenaries is not a procedural contract faction, has spaces in its name, and should not award some reputation. You can do the same thing over here. Karita, contract faction, and that stuff. Excalibur Mercenaries, spaces in its name, is not a procedural contract faction, and should not award reputation. So that's the basics of what this package can do. For more information, have a look at the 2 tutorial videos that walk you through the creation and modding examples. And if you run into any problems getting data-driven enums working, you can leave a comment or join my Discord, and I'll be happy to help you get it working. Thanks for watching, everyone.